Hello, friends. This is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series where I get to sit down and chat with other writers and I don't know, go deep into their brains, go deep into their history, figure out why it is they decided they want to be a writer. Before we get to today's episode, just a quick note that my 2024 Unbound Immersion coaching and writing retreat is now taking registrations. It's going to happen in October, spanning 2.5 days in October in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. October is a lovely year to be in Boulder, Colorado. I'm maxing out the class at 10 people. So check out my website, unboundwriter.com, and you can read more information about the retreat to see if it's something that might be right for you. And while you're there, you can check out my one-on-one coaching engagements that I do as well, along with the online classes that we will soon to be launching, might even have been launched by the time you listen to this episode. So today I actually had two guests on. We've done this a few times, not very many times, but I've had two guests on. Today was Kendra Elliot and Melinda Leigh. So one programming note, I will say, just so you have a heads up, they expressed interest about not doing the Making It Up portion of the show at the end, where we make up the little story at the end. I got a note from their PR person with that request. I will say it's the first time I've received that request, and it's totally fine. My intention with this show is to make sure my guests are happy and comfortable, and it's a good time for them, and hopefully not feeling like an obligation that they have to do. So if they don't want to do the storytelling, I am totally cool with that. So Kendra and Melinda have just co-written a book, Echo Road, which came out on July 2nd. And this is the first time that they've co-authored a book together, but they do have a history together. They've known each other for a dozen or so years, and they have teamed up together writing a series of novellas. With those novellas, as you'll hear in the episode, they came up with the ideas together, and then they took turns writing the novellas. So an entire novella would be written by one or the other of them. But with Echo Road, their first full-length novel co-written together, they brought together characters from their own series, and they each wrote their own characters. So this is a book that they truly co-wrote together. And as they kind of talk about in the episode, neither of them are outliners like me. They are both pantsers, writing from the seat of their pants. And so I thought it was interesting to co-write and also not really know where the book is going to go. But it worked out great for them. They actually did it in 7 weeks, which is mind-boggling when you don't know where the story is going to go. And they just had this great symbiotic relationship where they were able to, generate this book very quickly and also get along at the same time and agree with each other. And it seemed like a really good, solid relationship. So this might beget more novels from them. Only time will tell. But it was a great conversation. It was very interesting to hear how they went through this process together, and pick up a copy of Echo Road. It looks fantastic. This is my conversation with Kendra Elliot and Melinda Leigh. Melinda, remind me, were we in the same debut class? Yeah, that's what I thought, 2012.
Yeah, 2012, yes.
Had you written books before that? I mean, I know it was the debut, but because I'm on your website and you've got a crazy number of books, and I'm trying to figure out that math.
That was my first book.
Oh my goodness. How many books do you have now?
I'm going to say close to 40, including the novellas. Probably like 28 to 30 of those are novels, and the other 10 are novellas, something like that. I'd have to go count.
Right? Yeah.
And what about you, Kendra? What's your number?
I have the same problem. I know there's 11 novellas and 20, 22 books. Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to go count too.
It's amazing because you talk to a bunch of different writers, and the spectrum is from it takes me 2 months to it takes me 7 years to write a novel. And everyone falls somewhere in there. I'm a book a year person, so my 10th is coming out. So I guess I take my time. And now I've gotten to the point where the physical act of writing is pretty fast. Like I know how to write. But figuring out the story, since I don't outline, is always the challenge. I don't know how so Melinda, like, do you just know? Do you just know the story and you're like, okay, if I knew the outline, I could just crank it out fast.
No, I don't outline. I cross my fingers a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know. I used to do a book every 6 months, but now I'm doing a book every 8 months, which
Mhm.
I'm finding is a little bit nicer.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. What about you, Kendra?
I was on that same 6 month schedule for a long time. We were both doing a book every 6 months, and plus we were each doing a novella in our novella series.
Yeah.
Now I think I'm at a book every 9 months.
Okay. Well, that's still, I mean, I
And we
can,
don't
yeah,
plot, we don't outline either.
yeah.
So yeah.
But
It's
that's,
this.
yeah, but to the people who don't outline, I think that's the joy of the writing, the sheer discovery. And pantsing is kind of just very slow paced outlining, really. It's a really, your first draft is a very extensive outline. Because by the time I finish mine, I'm just like, this is terrible, but it's done. The structure is done, and now it can really hopefully come alive in the editing. Is that how you approach it a little bit?
For me, there's a lot of going back and editing. Like when I get stuck, I'll write, I don't know, like a quarter of the book, and then I always seem to get stuck. So then I go back and edit what I have, and then by the time I've done that, I'm like, oh, now I know where I'm going. Or
Yeah,
wow, I'm stuck because I really screwed up that last chapter. I need to go fix that.
right,
So by the
right.
time I have finished, usually the front 2/3 of the book has been edited multiple times, and just that whole back end is an absolute mess.
Kendra, have you tried outlining before?
I did. I'm a really organized person in
Uh-huh.
every other aspect of my life. Everything's got to be in its spot. And so I thought I should be an outliner.
Hmm.
And I think it was my third book that I was determined to plot and outline that book. I got shingles because I was so stressed out
Oh
of my
my
brain
God.
that it was not working.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
I just
That's
have to trust the process and know the book comes together.
that's a sign from the universe. I've heard shingles
Right.
is the shingles vaccine was bad enough. I've heard shingles
Yeah.
is just the worst thing in the world.
I think I got a pretty mild case compared to
Yeah.
a lot of people. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think my stress level was here because I was trying to outline a book.
But you're right. You have to trust. It's really trusting your subconscious because
Mhm.
it is working. It is working overtime, but it takes, I think, several books for you to get comfortable with that, because how often is it like you're 70-80% in, you don't know the ending, but all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is what this book is about. This is the theme of the book that I never was even thinking about. But as I look at all these characters, they've got this weird relationship that I hadn't planned, and it just kind of comes out, and it's quite an amazing thing when that happens. And it's very scary when it doesn't.
For me, it's, oh, that's who the killer is at 3/4 of the way through the book.
Right. But isn't that, I don't know. I think that's better because I didn't see it coming until 3/4 of the way through or whatever. And so hopefully people aren't like guessing on page 2 who it is. And then of course that necessitates maybe going back and layering in just enough foreshadowing / clues in there that it doesn't become obvious. But I think that's so exciting when that happens. But I'm with you. When I tried outlining on one book, within the first chapter, I had somebody get hit by a car that wasn't planned, because I'm just like, he's standing in the road. He's got to get hit by a car. And it totally changed the nature of the book. So I'm like, I always think of stuff immediately that I
Yeah.
never would have thought of just sitting there and trying to outline, I think.
I think what blows my
Yeah.
mind is if I'll write a scene and I'll be like, you know what? If I had written that scene 2 days ago, it would have been a totally different scene and the book would have gone in a totally different direction.
Isn't that weird?
That's kind of, I think about that sometimes. I'm like, okay, I ended up with this book because I happened to be writing on this day, and this is
Right,
what occurred to me that
right,
day.
right. And I think that phenomenon actually is, I think, what stops a lot of aspiring writers is that they're obsessing over the storyline and not just letting it go and be like, okay, this work, for better or for worse, is a reflection of who I was at this time in my life. You can go back and read your old works and be like, oh yeah, I remember my kids were 5 and I remember that's why I wrote that scene. And you just got to move on from that. And you like to think that that version of it that you ended up with is the best possible version. And it could, and that you didn't miss out on a huge opportunity, but people get so mentally blocked about it not being the perfect story that they just don't even finish the draft, I think.
Yeah.
Every
That
time
is
I've
not
tried
your
outlining
problem.
it, just throw it away.
Yeah.
Sometimes I
Yeah.
sit down and I plan a scene and okay, this character is going to do this. And then halfway through the scene, I'm like, I guess they're not. I guess they're going to do this other thing.
But I think that's a good sign though, right? Because it's a little precious when people, I think, talk about like, oh, I just sit back and the characters tell me what to do. But the reality of it is, like, if you're in that groove, the character, you start thinking like, no, they wouldn't do that. Not in
Yeah.
the moment. Like you have a connection with them that's more powerful than in outline form, at least for me. And it does kind of take over a little bit.
I would be bored if I knew everything that was going to happen for the next 4 months.
That's right.
I would be bored.
That's
So
right.
yeah.
Because writing is a job and it's hard work. No matter how much fun you're having, it's hard work. So if you take the joy out of it, then it's data entry.
Joy, anxiety, whatever you want to call it.
Now, you have a book coming out, Echo Road, tomorrow, actually, right?
Mhm.
Congratulations. That's very exciting. What is and this is where we get into all the annoying questions about co-authoring, which I just co-authored my first novel and we finished about a month ago. So it was a great experience, but it's not for everybody. What is your relationship co-writing together?
It's really good. We've known each other for a dozen years. We have the same publisher, we have the same editor. We know each other's writing styles, we know each other's personalities, we know each other's ethics. And, we first wrote together in a novella series, alternating novellas. I think we started in 2014.
Something like that.
Does that sound right? But that's a totally different process than what we did writing a novel.
Sure.
With the novella, we sat down, we plotted it together, and I would write it, and then she would write the next one. And so we weren't writing together, we were just plotting together, and we would read each other's work for continuity. But with this, we were writing together, and we had talked about it a long time before we actually sat down and did it. And we knew what our process was going to be. We knew what we could expect from the other person. And it went really smoothly and it went fast.
Yeah.
7 weeks.
7 weeks. Yeah.
So this is the first novel together.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but you had that. I mean, even though you weren't writing together within the same novella, you obviously had that experience of knowing what it was like to work together, which is probably 80% of the hurdle.
It
of
is.
just
You
conflicting
got to be really
personalities.
careful about who you choose to write with.
Yeah.
You can't have a lot of ego. You have to be willing to change on a dime, change direction and listen to the other person's concerns.
Yeah. And the other person has to be open-minded as well.
Yeah, because after 40 stories, I'm so glad to have somebody else think of something.
Right. Well, thinking of something new is always
right.
It's always one
fresh.
of the most exciting parts
right.
and always one of the most challenging parts as well, especially when you're as prolific as the two of you are. But I went, Kendra, I went through this. When I co-wrote, we came up with the idea together, which was new to me, the idea that you were actually structuring something. But I kind of said, hey, I want to write this because I have fun writing. So I wrote the entire thing, but I would give it to him and he would just not only give me ideas, but just make the changes, do whatever you want. I don't care. Just make the changes and make it clean. And it worked out great. But to your point, it could be, I've known disastrous things happening doing that same process. And it becomes very scary.
It can wreck friendships. I've heard bad things too.
Did you
We
Was Echo Road proposed to your joint publisher, or was it just something that you wanted to do and like, let's see what happens?
Oh,
The
They,
hard part was getting time in our schedules because we both have, contractual commitments. So to block out a couple of months with nothing to do was really hard to do.
right,
That was
right.
the major roadblock.
Because are you primarily working on this book and not other books at the same time?
I cannot do two at once.
I
My
can't
brain
either.
cannot. No, I'm in one book, one story, and that's more than enough for me.
Right. But often you're writing and then the editor's like, all right, now here's your editorial notes on your last book. And then that could be 2 months of like, now my brain isn't in the new thing. Now I've got to go back to this thing that I ended up hating because for whatever reason. And it is hard.
The funny thing about this book, we pitched it to our publisher, I think it was 2019, and they gave us a contract for it, and we hadn't written anything. I had to back out.
Oh,
Life, gets in the way.
yeah.
And I had to back out, which was it was just such a difficult time. And in the meantime, so we just set the project aside. We'll get to it when we get to it. And I think it was just a couple months we'd been talking. We're like, oh, I think next summer we might have the same, kind of hole in our schedules. Do you think we could write that book?
Yeah.
And so we sat down and pounded it out, and then we went like, hey, publisher.
But that's an ideal circumstance. I mean, that's a risk thing, right? If that hole in your schedule is a 7-week hole, most authors look at that and be like, that's not enough time. And if we don't get it done in 7 weeks, then does it just become a big mess, or do we have to push other things off? So you really were like self-imposed under the gun, it sounds like.
Yeah,
because we actually gave ourselves more than 7 weeks. We gave ourselves like 10 or 12. We blocked out 10 or 12 weeks. It just went so fast.
Yeah.
We just couldn't believe how fast the book actually came out. Just like, boom, it was done.
And it was kind of nice not to have a deadline hanging over our heads, I think.
Right.
We were doing it for ourselves at that point.
Right. I mean, it's healthy to give yourself your own deadline. But it is nicer to know, like, okay, worst comes to worst, I'm not beholden to the publisher on this. And I guess had you already kind of plotted in 2019 the story?
Not really. Well, we knew what the story was going to be about, but we didn't know any of the details.
Right. We had a copy, basically.
Right. That's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. But so that's a very fast time to write. So I want to talk a little bit about the actual method by which you wrote. There's a million different ways of doing it. A lot of people take, say there's 2 POVs, somebody takes each one of them. I've heard of alternating chapters, which sounds really difficult unless you are completely similar writers, which very few people are. How did you approach the actual physical act of writing this book together?
We started out doing, we brought each character from, Kendra brought Mercy Kilpatrick from her series, and I brought Bree Taggart from my series. So we agreed that we would write our own characters' point of views. And basically, in the beginning, it's not quite even, but we are kind of alternating chapters, depending on how it fell organically in the story. But then as we went along, we decided we needed 2 additional characters. So we split those up too. That way we could keep the voices, keep that continuity in the voice throughout the book.
Right. And then did you agree upon a loose outline at the beginning of all of this? So it was feeding each other chapters kind of, and just like, oh my God, what did you do?
Well, we kind of knew where we were going. We didn't know how it was going to end, but we knew who did it.
Yeah.
And we had a few events we knew were going to happen, but we would just sit down and plot out a couple chapters at a time. And then we would write those chapters, and then we would get together again and say, okay, this was good. Let's go to here now.
Right. And you probably, it's not as easy working together to go back, like what you were saying, Melinda, earlier, going back and say, okay, yeah, let's go edit the first 100 pages just to make sure it's tight before we get on, as opposed to just like, I like that idea of 2 chapters at a time, get it done, agree, and knowing that it's just accretion and you'll eventually be done, but then you can go back and edit it all. And what does that editing process look like? Let's each go through it one at a time or one after the other.
I think we edited as we went.
A little bit, our own chapters, yeah.
Yeah, I will write a chapter and then the following day go back and clean it up. By the time I'm usually done with my own books, it's pretty clean.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what we did. We would review each other's chapters just to make sure the continuity was there. But we were each responsible, I'd say, for editing our own chapters. We'd occasionally make a suggestion to the other person.
No swearing at each other, no huge fights. Sounds like it was all.
No egos. We don't care. It's like, oh, that's a great idea you have. Let's run with that.
Right.
I have no idea. So yours sounds fantastic.
Right. Or you might even both have ideas, but you can easily recognize that the other person's is the better idea. And you're like, oh, if I were writing this my own, it would have been sub whatever we ended up with because of, and that's the beauty of it. When you realize it's the beauty of teamwork, right? When you're like, oh, there are better ideas than mine. I didn't realize.
Oh, I know there's better ideas than mine.
Yeah. But it does take a real lack of ego. And the writer is such a solitary creature and usually just exists within their own ego. And for better or for worse, it usually is like, this is mine. This is my idea. And I know I suffer from that a little bit. That's why I wanted to write the actual book. So sometimes it's hard if somebody has something that maybe sounds good, but it doesn't fit with your worldview. And then you have to really think about like, is this the direction I want to go? But sounds like that wasn't the problem for the two of you.
Encountered that, did we?
Not really. We would just, if we both had an idea, we would just talk it through and say, okay, so where are we going to be in 3 or 4 chapters? Which idea is going to achieve those goals?
Yeah.
Or let's save that idea for, down the road.
So is this the first in a series?
Maybe.
Are we breaking news right now or?
No. We have several ideas for another collaborative book, but we're not sure if it's going to be the same characters, different characters, from like our other series, or if we're going to create something completely new. We have ideas for all of those things.
Yeah.
It's a matter of getting the time to actually do it more than it is having ideas.
Right. Because both of you have no lack of ideas, not only jointly, but obviously individually for your own projects. How do you approach that? And I know sometimes when you're looking at a series, are you saying there's going to be 2 more books in the series because I have a sense of where it's going to close? Or is it just you're coming up with ideas and you're writing them down and then you finish a book, like you have to sit there and decide, what do I do next? I've got 20 things that I want to do. What do I do next? Because there's only a certain amount of time I have.
I don't have that problem. I do not have ideas. I have to scratch and pull every single idea out of my brain. The book I'm working on is getting absolutely everything that I can come up with. I never have extra ones that, maybe down the road. That for me, it's really hard. I don't consider myself to be a creative person. I'm more of a logical person.
Well, logic is all problem solving, and problem solving inherently at its root is creativity, right? I think. You're finding the creative solution to who did it in a way.
Okay. I'll accept that.
I have lots of ideas, so I'm always jotting them down, for the next book in the series. Sometimes I'll call my agent and talk to her and say, what do you think? Here's like the 3 ideas I have for the next book. What do you think is good? What do you think is viable? What do you think? We'll talk about it. She's been my agent since like 2011, 2010.
Yeah, I've had mine since 2002.
Yeah,
Nice.
so we have a really good relationship, and I can actually just talk to her and say, "What do you think? Which idea do you think would work best now?"
Oh, that's really interesting. But one of the beauties of being a pantser is when you're thinking about ideas, you don't have to have the whole idea, right? You can have like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if X, Y, and Z, and that maybe gets you through the hook or the pitch. So 3 or 4 chapters maybe. And then as a pantser, you're like, now what happens? And that's the fun part. So you don't have to have this really well thought out idea. So Kendra, when you approach something new, is it usually just that, if I were watching this on TV and this were the pilot episode, I'd want to watch it. So I'm going to write the equivalent of that first episode. And then I don't know what happens after that.
That's pretty much it. I can tell you right now, I have no idea what is going to happen in the book after I finish the one I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
No idea. I'm not even
Yeah.
sure who the characters are going to be.
Yeah. But that's fun. Like I'm starting something new right now,
Very,
and I'm like, here's a new character. I'm like, what's their name? I have no idea.
yeah.
But yeah, that's cool though. I think that's the fun way of going about it, because it is just this act of discovery. But you have to also, and after a while, after so many books, you have a sense of like, if you just have that idea of the opening, maybe you
Yeah.
still inherently have to have a sense of, is there going to be enough here for a novel? And you just kind of have a gut feeling of like, yeah, it's a cool idea, but this feels like a novella or an episode of TV. It doesn't feel like a series. Or you have a sense of like, oh, there's a lot to mine here because of this type of character. If there's a type of character like this in there, there's a lot of potential for what was in their past and how that comes into play. Do you get that sense at all when you have those little nuggets?
That's what happened to me with my Mercy Kilpatrick series.
Hmm.
I wrote 6 books in that series, and I knew that there was enough there to write a whole bunch. And I actually added 2 more books. Ooh, 2 more books after that. Um, but sometimes you're just writing a couple of characters and you kind of know that this is their story. It's all going to be right here. There isn't going to be more.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of written their story and I'm finished with them. Moving on.
And Melinda, when you look at all of your books, are most of them part of a series?
They're series, but they're not all continuing character series. My last
Hmm.
2 series have been continuing character, which I really enjoy. I really like that development of a character over, a dozen stories. For me, that's a lot more interesting than just having a character resolve all his issues in 350 pages.
Yeah. But
Um,
that's the other end of that, of course,
right.
is that how many things can keep happening to this one character? How much can I go back to the well on this? And it depends on how much you love your character and how much, obviously their profession. But also just okay, it's a natural, you get a sense of it over time, I suppose. I mean, 12 books would be a lot, I feel like, for one character, but if you can keep going with it, then why wouldn't you?
But like the novella series we wrote them in these small towns, and by the time we'd written 10 novellas, I mean, everybody was either a murderer or a victim at
Right,
that
what
point.
kind
You're
of
like, all
town
right,
is this?
there's nobody left in this town, and who would want to live here? People just drop dead every week.
Right, right. But that's a suspension of disbelief that the reader goes into it with, hopefully, and then the quality of the writing kind of buttresses all of that. I've never written this. I've always, every one of my books are standalones, just because I'm so excited about like who and where and why next time. That just is one of the most exciting things to me. And I've had a couple books that have crossover, because you do like to kind of play on those characters or the town or whatever. But there is something exciting about the discovery of all. And I would think pantsing would be kind of difficult with the series, because do you know, like Kendra, with your series, do you know the arc of the series, like the general arc of the series, or just like, I want to keep writing about this person?
Um, the general arc I do know is usually the primary relationship between the 2 main characters. I want to see them grow and come closer each book. each book they have to go through something together and they're going to come out closer at the end.
Hmm.
And I just, I can come up with a murder plot around that and
Mhm.
always something, a new way to kill somebody or something
Mhm.
horrible to happen.
But it sounds that then you get to a certain point where you feel like their relationship is where
Yeah.
it's satisfying to me.
Yeah.
And so therefore the series is done.
And then all the readers write you, we want more, we want more, we want more. So, and I can see
Yeah.
in my last two books in my Mercy series, there's not as much growing between the characters, but there's a lot of stuff going on.
Right. Right. Because something can always happen
Yeah.
that sends them apart again.
Oh, yeah. Got
Mhm.
that almost every book.
Yeah. And you can always just kill them at the end. So
Ooh,
you'll get different kinds of emails, but they won't
right?
be like bring them back.
Well, you're going to kill somebody.
Right. Somebody's got to die. But again, that's the beauty of pantsing. I remember one of my books, like I was probably 60% in, and I just had that thought of like, what if this guy just died right now? This major character, what if he just died? And I just wrote it just because I was interested, and it turned out to be better, or in my opinion, better. But it changes everything. But then no series with that guy. What is the launch plan for this book? Are you doing anything together?
We're on different
Kendra isn't.
coasts at the
Yeah.
moment.
Mhm.
I'm working on my next book. That's my celebration.
Right,
Yeah.
right. We're both back in the writing cave quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think
There's no
this is
rest,
going to
is there?
sound horrible, but when you've had 30 releases, the launch day is just another writing day.
Yeah. You're totally right. And even for those, what do you want to call it? The first five books. And that is a little cynical, like to sound like after five, it feels like all the same. But there's really like, unless you're doing a launch event,
Yeah.
it's not like, confetti starts falling from the sky on that day over your house. It is just a normal day. And you're like, okay, I've been hyping this book on my social media accounts for 3 months, and now I
Yeah.
don't have to do it so much anymore. That's
Yeah,
good.
looking back, I can remember, going out to dinner for a special dinner for launch day. I remember a cake that had my cover on it for launch day one
Totally.
time.
I had that.
But that's been long ago. I haven't done much since.
Yeah. Well, because you get to the point, you're like, this is my job. I
Mm,
don't, I don't throw a party every time I do a tax return as an accountant.
no.
But yeah, I mean, I threw parties for like maybe the first three books, had friends, and then you realize like, all right, this isn't, maybe if it were a hobby, it would feel better to do something like that.
And the Amazon ratings are going to be what they be, no matter how many times I scroll and refresh to
Right,
check
That's
what happened.
right.
right,
They're just going to do their own thing.
right. But that's an interesting point. In terms of reviews, especially when you're for this book, when you start looking at, a combined effort, do reviews weigh on you? And I'm talking more, trade reviews are what they are. Those are the ones I'm always on pins and needles for, but you can't control it. And not that you can control any of them, but then the user reviews, I'm always curious about, and I'll read them for a couple weeks. And then I'm more curious about the count overall rather than the content of the reviews. How do you look at yours?
Um, I only look at reviews from people I know, people who are big fans.
Mhm.
I have people that read it ahead of time. They get the arcs
Right,
once the book
right,
releases.
right. So
I
you're
do
looking at
not read.
Goodreads stuff like
I'm looking at people that I know
right.
love my books and I
Yeah,
know love my character. And if I'm delivering what they want, I don't read reviews after that because I figure reviews are for other readers. They're not for me.
right,
There's
right,
enough voices in my head every day. I don't need other people's.
right. What about
Mhm.
you, Kendra?
I think on my first release, I started reading the reviews on Amazon, and I, like Melinda said, voices in my head. I'm remembering everything they're saying, and even the good ones, and I don't like it. So I do not read my reviews unless a reviewer sends it to me
Yeah.
or sends me a link to it, then I will go and read the review.
Yeah.
Or
I
if they
want
send you a link
I
to
want
my
that
review.
star
right?
rating, that's about it.
Yeah.
If my editor likes the book, then that's all I need to know.
Yeah. Well, right.
What's really funny is sometimes reviewers will send a review for Kendra's book to me, and then
Oh,
I
yeah.
have to forward it because they confuse us all the time.
Right. Aren't you the same?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
They say that.
That's funny.
You know, they think if you type it in, or, Kendra Elliot and Melinda Leigh, the same, Google just fills that right in. They've
Right.
been asked that question
That's
enough.
funny.
They wonder if we're the same person. They mix up our characters. They think we're sisters.
Right. You both live in Florida.
It's been
Brown hair.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to check Goodreads leading up to the release just to get a pulse of like, is this being received in a way that makes me happy, meets my expectations, and what are because it is data ultimately. Because if everybody said I hated the ending, obviously you can't change the ending, but it's information. It's like, oh, that's interesting. But you do have the confidence of like, look, this went through my agent, this went through my editor, it got published, they paid me to write this, so I know it's not terrible. I saw a one-star
Sorry for the
review.
barking.
I saw a one-star review for my new book the other day. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What is that? And it's like, I never received my free copy.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the only time I've ever replied to a review. I'm like, hey, shoot me a message. I'll try to figure this out, which they never did. But I'm like, I didn't say this, but I'm like, you don't really have to leave a one-star review just because you didn't get your free copy yet. But nothing you can
I
do.
see that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's not my job, but let me see what I can do.
Amazon delivered it late. 1 star.
Oh my God, how frustrating. Well, listen, congratulations on Echo Road. That's very exciting. I think I'm going to go check out the reviews tomorrow and just see like, did these guys nail it on the novel? So, but it looks like there's probably, or sounds like there could be the potential for more in the future, and certainly co-writing of some form or another, because
we liked it.
It is working. So congratulations, and it was great talking to you both.
Thanks, Carter.
All right, take care.
Bye.
All right, so that's it. That is my conversation with Kendra and Melinda. It was great. I really enjoyed talking to the both of them and hearing about their process of co-writing together. Obviously, they're very, very well-established authors on their own right. They're both best-selling, award-winning, and award-nominated authors with a huge amount of books between them. But they really seem to gel together as co-authors. So I'm excited to see what happens and what they come out with in the future. Echo Road is now available, so please go check that out. And you can also look at both of their established works by going to their website. So you can go to Melinda Leigh, Leigh.com. And Melinda, I am sorry if you're listening to this. I'm not sure if it's Leigh or Leigh. I probably said it a couple different times, but it's Leigh. And Kendra Elliot, you can just go to KendraElliot.com. While you're on the internet, go ahead and pop over to carterwilson.com and check out my books, my events, my newsletter, my blog, and then head over to unboundwriter.com and you can see if my October writing retreat and coaching program might be right for you. And you can check out my one-on-one coaching as well as my online classes. All right. That is it for now. Thank you, as always, for watching and or listening to this episode of Making It Up. Another episode will be out just next week. In the meantime, take care.